1971, when the dates showed the year 1971, a social psychologist named Philip George Zimbardo and a group of scientists organized an experiment to test people's reactions to social roles and identities. The experiment was as follows. 24 male college students who volunteered for the experiment would stay in a simulated prison that was meticulously prepared to be very close to reality for 2 weeks. The volunteers were divided into 2 groups and assigned the roles of prisoners and guards. Professor Zimbardo determined their roles without informing the volunteers. The volunteers were expected to conform to their given roles, and their reactions would be measured. Everything was prepared to be as realistic as possible. A simulated prison was set up in the basement of the psychology department at Stanford University. The cells, guard rooms, and other areas were set up to resemble reality as closely as possible. The volunteers assigned the role of prisoners were obligated to obey the orders of the volunteers in the role of guards. The volunteers in the role of guards were instructed to exert as much pressure as possible and to act harshly towards the prisoners, but they were strictly warned not to resort to violence. In later footage, Zimbardo was seen talking to the guards in the following manner. You can create a sense of boredom among the prisoners, you can create fear to some extent, and you can make them feel that their lives are completely controlled by arbitrary forces, the system, you and me. And they will have absolutely no privacy. We will strip away their individuality in various ways. As a result, they will generally feel powerless, and we expect that. So, as a result, we will have all the power, and they will have none. Guard uniforms, and given wooden batons. They were even provided with mirrored sunglasses to avoid eye contact with the prisoners. For the prisoners, realistic discomforting outfits were given, with numbers sewn on them so that the guards could address them. Their feet were chained, and they were given plastic sandals that were intentionally uncomfortable and caused foot pain. The experiment officially began on August 17, 1971. Under Zimbardo's orders, the volunteers designated as prisoners were arrested from their homes without their knowledge and taken to a police station. The collaboration with the Palo Alto Police Department was done to help the volunteers adapt to the experimental environment more comfortably and embrace their roles. The volunteers were arrested by real police officers, had their fingerprints taken, and had profile photos taken. They were then transported in a real prisoner transport vehicle to the artificial prison where the experiment would take place. The prison environment was highly disturbing for the prisoners. They were housed in cramped 3-person cells. Additionally, a courtyard was designed for the prisoners to move around. Thus, the first day marked the beginning of the experiment. The guards faithfully followed Zimbardo's instructions and guidelines. They worked in shifts, as groups, at regular intervals, and exerted considerable pressure on the prisoners. The first day went relatively smoothly. The prisoners followed the given orders without any issues, but an atmosphere of unrest among the prisoners had already emerged from the very first day. On the second day of the experiment, things began to change. The prisoners started to resist the guards' orders due to the growing unrest, and the prisoners in the first cell even initiated a rebellion. They formed a barricade with their beds and blocked the entrance of the cell. The guards' response to the situation was surprisingly savage and sadistic. As the days of the experiment progressed, everything worsened. Despite only a few days passing, the volunteers were adapting more and more to their roles. Each guard became more sadistic and brutal, while the prisoners became more rebellious and fearful. As the days went by, the experiment took on a horrific nature. The guards started developing various psychological control tactics and punishments to become more authoritative and oppressive towards the prisoners. For instance, they would reward the non-participating prisoners by placing them in a separate cell and treating them better. On the other hand, prisoners who couldn't comply with the guards' orders were subjected to severe pressures. Their mattresses and sheets were taken away, and they were forced to sleep on metal frames. These terrifying events, punishments, and the escalating tendencies towards violence deeply affected everyone involved, including Professor Zimbardo, who played the role of the prison superintendent in the experiment. Zimbardo witnessed firsthand how the volunteers accepted the roles assigned to them by society and how their inclinations towards violence and brutality escalated uncontrollably. Zimbardo initially didn't know what to do because the situation had completely spiraled out of control. Even though only 3 days had passed since the start of the experiment, prisoner 8612, as described by Zimbardo, began displaying what he called crazy behavior. Zimbardo explained the events involving the prisoner as follows. Prisoner 8612 started behaving wildly, screaming, shouting, cursing, and experiencing uncontrollable fits of anger. It took us quite some time to acknowledge that he was genuinely in this psychological state, and eventually, we decided to release him. Professor Zimbardo put an end to the experiment on the 6th day due to the escalating tendencies towards violence and behaviors reaching the level of the sickeningly familiar push-up punishments used in Nazi camps, as well as the severe deterioration of the prisoner's psychological well-being. The horrifying events that unfolded over 6 days served as proof of how even seemingly normal and psychologically healthy individuals could become vicious and sadistic when given the opportunity. These events became the subject of documentaries and award-winning films, sparking numerous discussions and debates. Zimbardo explained the brutality witnessed with the following words. In their dreams, there was no escape from this prison. When the prisoners woke up from their sleep, they would find themselves bound by chains around their ankles, and in agony, they would remember that they were trapped in a prison as they struggled to turn to the other side of the bed.